And good afternoon, good day. Welcome to Ocean Freight TV. I'm your insider, Steve Ferreira, CEO of Ocean Audit, Chairman of Ocean Freight TV. So great to have you in our studio today as I reveal container shipping's big secrets. But before we start the show today, I thought it would be important for all my friends, followers, and everyone on LinkedIn to get a brief update on the ILWU Pacific Maritime Association. Potential continued labor stoppages and potential striking actions. The Pacific Maritime Association released a small bulletin on their website today. And I'll just read it to you. It's very short, but I think it's valuable to give my friends, followers, fans a good flavor on what's happening today in the West Coast negotiations. So the statement from the Pacific Maritime Association reads as follows. The Pacific Maritime Association's negotiations with the ILWU for a new labor contract at the 29 West Coast ports are critically important for the health of jobs, businesses, and communities nationwide. As historic supply chain congestion continues, it is vital that both sides reach agreement without any disruption at the ports. We are proud of the collaboration with the ILWU during this extraordinary period and hopeful that the spirit of cooperation will continue as we pursue a new agreement. And for more on the 22 contract negotiations, there's a link to click. I think it's really interesting that in light of the service bulletins that, for example, Maersk Lines put out over the last 5 or 6 days, we're starting to see a lineup right back in the queue area of the holding bays off of the California West Coast, where we have a lineup, and that's not good. Any kind of action, reaction, wildcat strike, and I think the Pacific Maritime Association was interesting in their verbiage the other day where they talked about new tactics, but the same results, right? So the idea here is that what the PMA is trying to do, for those new to my show or the industry, Pacific Maritime Association is the collaborative group of all the VOCC owners and employers, that job out to the ILWU, farm out obviously the crucial labor. So I think the issue here is that the PMA is dangling a little bit of this, the fact that so much cargo has left the West Coast for the East Coast to continue a action, recovery, and not recover, the West Coast tonnage that was lost, just as a detriment to the West Coast ports. However, as I think the ILWU may be viewing this, is if I can get, and I say I, meaning collectively the ILWU, the lineups going back in the holding areas outside the 50 and 300 mile zones on the Pacific Ocean, and I can impact vessel scheduling, reliability. If I can get, I still see, thousands of empty containers coming in on inbound vessels. Maybe I do a few things here and I get more attention. It's a little bit like the wolf, the little boy that cried wolf, right? There was a lot of great times to negotiate these contracts, and there was a time gone by the wayside, and perhaps it's like a good stock trade, right? Where you'd say, oh, I wish I'd sold that stock at 500. And now today it's $100, right? So the value here is inherent, but it is interesting, and I thought I would read that little narrative on what's happening with the ILWU. In preparing today's show, I'm always I'm kind of known as the creative guy, the data guy around ocean freight, and today's show is not really any different. When I prepared kind of, and usually you'll start to see a lot of my shows talking about items as we get closer to peak and holiday seasons. But this is a season like no other. And I think because of the vacillation and oscillation, of ocean freight rates, we're seeing a very unique commodity mix, a unique cargo mix, unlike my 40 years in the trade that I had never seen before. And I think the interesting piece of the story when I talk about, here are some insider things that you could look at Walmart or Target and, just give it a couple weeks and they'll be on sale. I'm all up for that. I think that's totally cool. I think that's a really creative bent or niche that I bring to the industry. But today's lead story is really interesting. It really doesn't have to do with you buying anything or anything being on sale. It's something I think very important to the media that just flew under the radar. And I call it, what's that glow? And in preparation for today's show, I wanted to look at this week's container movements, meaning, in the last 5 or 6 days. So, and even up as late as the last 2 days, 48 hours. Everything I'm presenting to you today is in real time or somewhat real time. So in the last couple days, over 150 containers came into Everett, Washington of radioactive soil from Australia. Yeah, that happened. And it's been happening for a while. And I'll explain. It's the lead story here on Ocean Freight TV. You're watching Steve Ferreira, CEO of Ocean Freight TV, as I present this week's Insider edition of the major moving commodities. So what's that glow? There's an obscure 100-year-old carbide and uranium plant in Sydney, Australia, that vastly polluted the grounds and earth around the Sydney area. So it just so happens that the U.S. Department of Energy has a contamination site run by U.S. Ecology in Idaho that's cleared to take on this kind of hazardous waste. Yeah. And so we've got 134, 136 containers of contaminated soil that arrived in SOC, shipper-owned containers, in 40-foot containers, which, by the way, was really interesting. Stuff must be bagged, I guess. So it's low-level radioactive. It came into the port of Everett a few days ago. And they're on their way, if not there yet, to their site in Idaho. I just thought it was amazing that the story was, other than an obscure, and I say with peace and love, a small media outlet in Idaho, the story was not picked up at all. And I think that this is kind of a worldwide exclusive. If the media wants more information on that, they can certainly reach out to me at LinkedIn or at oceanaudit.com, Steve F. at oceanaudit.com, and get more information on this really unique issue that's gone on under the radar. I think it's really fascinating. We have this, ecology site in Idaho that's cleared for this, but I mean, we're bringing another country's non-desired waste into our country, which I don't know. I guess I've never gone political or philosophical on the show. I'm not going to start now, but I think that's just a really interesting commodity that it's the top single moving item this week in my basket of tricks. Now, it's not all glow; it's also gold. And I think that when you look at the streets paved to gold, you can also think that the container markets, ocean freight shipment, freight waves, pardon the pun, freight waves, are paved with gold. So we have a secret connection here. 30 containers I saw in the last 2 days come in from Mexico to heading out to Europe via Houston. That's the reason why I have visibility. And manifesting, anything that passes through a U.S. port gets visible. So we have gold and silver concentrate, 30 containers with a street value of about $6 million. Going Mexico, Veracruz, Mexico, to Hamburg, and a transship via Houston, with kind of a unique kind of Bulgarian connection where the principles of the importation are based, but also a bit of a Geneva, Swiss kind of type, shaded, muted vibe behind it. So, and trust me, this is one of those items that, my 40,000, I think, I'm going to be a little vain here, right? I think only my 40,000 hours could have found this item. This item has to be the most super protected item on the ship. Although, in reality, the FOB value, what is that, about 200,000 a container? I mean, it's a very strong value, but, there's microchips and other things that have awesome values as well that we underestimate when we look at ocean freight, which I think is another big theme for the story. I have no idea what the ocean freight rate is on a container of gold. Suffice to say, it's probably pretty high up there. We used to say, 10% of the FOB value, and that would have put the ocean freight at about $20,000, right? And, some of my friends that are importing plastic bags into the Midwest were paying that, not so long ago. So, what's fear and love and war, I guess. But it's really interesting on this Bulgarian gold connection. This is an ongoing movement, and CMA is handling it. And as I said, I've never seen so much I guess for good reason, right? So much secretive protection around the cloaking of what's in this container. So I had to do a lot of digging to find out what was in there. And I came through for you. Well, so far this is like crazy, right? Because I don't know whether it's just because, a lot of the regular commodities have stopped moving, or they're just, not moving in regular frequency because of the slowdown in container activity, or I'm just noticing a lot more interesting activity. Speaking of activity, I put on my best kind of Prague spy hat in the middle of the night here with my Robert Grisham or John Grisham novel and my umbrella here, and we could be in Prague, but we're not. We're in the U.S. and we're talking about legal cocaine. This blew my mind. In 40,000 hours, as you can see there on my slide, 40,000 hours doing this. I've never seen anything like this. Legal cocaine. Let me explain a little bit. So Coca-Cola has a contractor in New Jersey that has the ability to decocainize the coca leaves that come from Peru. This is a fascinating story. The Daily Mail had broke the story a couple of weeks ago. It's not an original Steve Ferreira creation, but the editorial part of this is something the Daily Mail didn't really have, and I have. So we've seen 150 tons of this stuff. Coca leaves come in. The Daily Mail had said 500 tons. So my numbers are accurate. The Daily Mails were speculative. So it's not as much as the Daily Mail had suspected. And I have some great friends over there that write for them. And I am a source from time to time for the Daily Mail. So again, peace and love. It was a great story. But I think this is just really interesting that the Department of the Drug Enforcement Administration actually authorizes this factory, and it's not Coca-Cola, right? It's a contractor of Coca-Cola, to import the coca leaves. And then they have a strict policy where the finished cocaine, medical grade cocaine, is sold to a Mallinckrodt, which is a medical wholesaler, high-end drug and chemical, which I think this goes into the dentistry scope of the genre of medical medicaments, treatments. So it's legal cocaine, and every import gets a Department of Drug Enforcement Administration special license. You can see the license right in the manifesting data. It's just fascinating to see legal cocaine coming in to the country and then being sold. So go figure, only in America, I guess. So how do we go from legal cocaine to grilling a couple up on the Barbie, right? But I think this is, as we head into the heart of today's show, as we kind of hit our halfway segment here, we've got these incredible Blackstone griddles. We've seen about 40, 50 containers this week for Walmart. So you could expect probably, as these get into distribution in the warehousing environment, probably a 2 to 3 week lag, and then you will probably definitely see these in some ad or prominently displayed in a feature for Walmart, perhaps in conjunction with some other outdoor items, which we'll talk about in a second. But this is a major mover this week, about 50 containers of these griddles. And what would a good griddle be without having a little TV action to support it? So we've got a special model here for at Walmart from Philips, featuring Google TV, and it's their Model 55 PUL 7552. And this has been received at about 40 containers this week of just nothing but this particular model. So look for, if you're in the market for some TVs, you might want to record that model number. Keep a good steady eye on it over at Walmart. and tell them that Ocean Audit sent you. Without TV, what else could be Kid Rockish in terms of a rock star chair? Well, we've got 50 containers of foldable outdoor camping chairs, which is another kind of demarcation point of the spring-summer season. And I don't know if Kid Rocks is going to do anything with Bud Light in this chair, but it's a good demarcation point of stocking up on the outdoor patio scene, the outdoor grill and camping scene. So about 50 containers, again, from our friends at Walmart and Target. What would a great ocean freight TV show be without talking about a boutique approach towards retail? And Target brings their bright room models, which if you can actually go in Google right now, their department class item number, it's right there, 00201 0716, and that item is hardwired in the Google search, right? So you won't see that item number anywhere when you put that search in, but that will bring up the bright line items, and those are the items that Target has imported this week to the tune of about 50 to 65 containers. It seems that, the first thing that came to my mind is I've got some great friends over at Wayfair, and Wayfair does a great job thinking up these great, classic, exciting names for featured products, almost companies, right, that are theirs, but they don't just say, it's Wayfair sofa, it's Wayfair desk, it's, Laxanda, I'm just making up a name, say with peace and love to my friends at Wayfair. But Target's idea of saying, hey, this is Bright Room, our Bright Room line, I think it's a brilliant marketing strategy, and it kind of does escalate, that whole, I remember years ago, and, people would always say, hey, we're going to Target. And to me, this does bring up Target's stock a bit and, giving them a more than a generic name recognition when it comes to buying, say, bathroom accessories or waste baskets. By the way, a good part of the 50, 60 containers that moved under the Bright Room product line this week were actually waste baskets, right? So how do you give a waste basket, a good name? Well, Bright Room sounds great, right? You brighten the room and you fill it with other decorative products such as vase and home office decor. It's a great strategy. And so look for the Bright Room line to be prominently featured at your Target stores. Hey, let's go have some pop-up fun. My next item is, again, in the theme of the kind of the outdoor Ozarks type theme, regional, southeast kind of, camping. Let's go in the Rocky Mountains. The pop-up tents, certainly a lower price point item, but great to kind of get the summer barbecue or pre-spring barbecue flair going. And it's really interesting what I see here. Because the first time I've seen this is, for example, at Walmart, where you can see 100 sold, 200 sold, 100 sold in the last 24 hours, 100 in the cart in the last 24 hours. I don't know if that's the most strategic move, Walmart sharing their inventory movement, right? I know that that's a very interesting thing to see a fast inventory move. And I think that also does create kind of mini floating warehouses where we start to see smaller increments of containers move at more frequent times. So actually it could be very good for container shipping, the way that retailers are managing inventory management in the summer of 2023. Now, the award for the most confusing name is something from Europe, the Endurance Silk Cover Digital, right? When I first saw that, I thought to myself, Silk Cover Digital, what the heck is that? And my mind went racing. What could it be? Well, it turns out it's just paper. It's coated paper. And I recall the great economics guru from Michigan State, Jason Miller, hi Jason, hope you're watching, had predicted that there was a shortfall of paper, and now we're starting to see more higher end paper moving back into the country for digital prints, ads, and again, a lot of this paper is used high-end retail, and it's interesting that this particular Endurance Silk Cover is a unique product that I've not seen move from Europe for a long time. So paper is back, and it's interesting to see the specific premium qualities of it moving into the country. And of course, Europe's always been big on paper. I think if you look at Office Depot or Staples, you'll see a lot of paper made in France and other places like that. So Endurance Silk might be part of International Paper family. I'm not sure on that. I don't want to quote me on that. But it is interesting to start to see the paper move back, and especially in this kind of quantity, 20, 30 containers in the last couple of days. I talked about the inventory turns that Walmart's starting to or share online, and not really inventory turns, just how many units are selling per day. We see this in the televisions. I mean, these television specials that Walmart's bringing in, they bring in 8,000 units, they're selling 100 a day. It kind of tells you, okay, it takes them 80 days to turn that particular container. So I think it's really, really, really an interesting dynamic that we might be seeing. It might be the start of seeing more, instead of seeing these 25 and 50 block container moves, maybe we start to see more frequent 6 and 7 block container moves. Kind of use that floating warehouse concept that, if John Monroe, my good friend's watching this, John, we memorialized that whole floating concept and back in the 80s, where we try to sell detention in transit or, and again, these are all new buzzwords, right, to a lot of our younger viewers, but there are a lot of strategies where you can defer getting the goods in a timely way. And so it's possible that this could be the start of something new, a new type of movement, both for retail and ocean freight vendors that we have to keep an eye on. As we move towards this is one of my favorites. I love this one. I love it, love it, love it. And I'll tell you why, because you can go right now to Walmart's site and Google the George, which is their house brand, men's cargo shorts. Out of stock, right? And you can see that that's an actual, in the red triangle, that's the actual label from the website that I pulled before the show started today. And then I put in my own words, not any longer. So what I love about this particular slide is if you just give this one another 5-10 days and you go back to this, just say, hey, was that Ferreira guy right? I guarantee you, that this item will be back in stock in the next 5 or 10 days. And if anything, it may even run a special in terms of promotion that Walmart may want to do, or it could just be back as a normal item for the summer, spring buying season, and no longer obviously out of stock. So it's a critical item, and especially at this particular price point. You can see the number of reviews are pretty stout. So makes it really worthwhile to keep an eye on this. But this is one of the beauties of the fact that ocean freight never sleeps, right? It has a pulse, and you can actually see it move markets. And I've tried to illustrate that in today's show. Another thing that actually moves markets, but let's hope it's not that radioactive soil that I talked about, is how about these incredible Sani, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it correctly, mini excavators. These are incredibly expensive machines at about $50,000 to $60,000 with accessories per unit. And what I was seeing here is a lot of high value item. And the timing is great. And I think the reason why we're seeing these excavators and other high valued items is they no longer have to pay the $25,000 and $30,000 ocean freight prices that, if you're moving one of these or two of these in a container knocked down, right, that adds a lot to the unit in terms of what the cost is. So manufacturers like Sani, I would look for other heavy, and this is actually really interesting. I would say the breakthrough here, and it's something that just dawned on me this very second, is I look for other high-valued industrial items to move very heavily. And it may be a surprise, right, that the value of cargo is very significant compared to, say, last year. Now, that's not to say the volume is going to be, but the value may be very high. We're starting to see this right now with a lot of the items. And one that is just off the charts is the Taiwan Semiconductor. And what they've done in Arizona with their new facility is off the charts. And again, this is this story is almost as interesting as the radioactive soil. And I bring this up because in all of 2021, they did about 300 containers to try to get the infrastructure moving on their new the new Arizona plant. TSCM, Taiwan Semiconductor Machinery. I believe that's what it's called, or Taiwan Semiconductor. Now, Taiwan Semi is one of the world's leaders in chip manufacturing. And this year alone, in the last 12 months, 15 months, kind of aggregate, they've brought in well over 5,000 containers. And so this is interesting and also somewhat controversial that some of the chip catalyst machines that they're bringing in, there's some question, is this going to inhibit, American growth in the chip industry, what Taiwan Semi is doing. So it's almost as if, the administration is kind of having, trying to have the cake and eat it too by, allowing and authorizing and welcoming Taiwan Semiconductor into their new facility, and at the same time, perhaps raising some challenges or questions. Is this going to inhibit or do anything to the American chip manufacturing that the Biden administration so desperately wants to enhance and improve on? And I think what time will tell, but it's a very interesting story that came across my desk yesterday that I wanted to share with you. Now, hey, speaking of interesting stories, when you're talking about Containergeddon, I still have it psychologically in my head that this Containergeddon factor is not escaping me. But we have the charter ships that were a big aspect of Containergeddon, and guess what? They're back. This time, Sony is sharing a charter ship in the last couple of days with a break bulk ship into Houston. And this break bulk ship had big pipes. I'm talking about oil pipes. Now, Sony's got big pipes on it too, but Sony's big pipes are the kind that need big pipes of internet connectivity to work in terms of their interactive gaming. So Sony had exclusively about 100 containers of their interactive systems on the big pipe ship into Houston. And it's really interesting and telling that Houston is also a drop ship area for a lot of the big box retailers. So it'll be interesting to see if Sony's got a 2-for-1 in being able to take some of their fine products and land them in Houston and just get them across the street to some big DCs like Hint. Walmart is allegedly to be in the area. No, I'm kidding. I know Walmart's there. But this is a really interesting use of the charter ships, and Sony pulled off a slick one, in terms of getting the cargo into Houston on the oil pipe ship. So I thought pipes sounds good. Hey, and just closing out, what would a great show be without talking a little bit about the overall impacts on Russia and Ukraine. So I did notice, one of the big things I'm seeing on Ukraine is an incredible uptick in their imports of apple juice into America. Last year we had a few hundred containers a month. Now we've probably doubled that in terms of where we're at now with apple juice from Ukraine. And it's interesting. I hadn't taken the time to think or construct an argument about, how the conflict might impact fruits or soils or vegetables, or, I was just thinking, all this silly warfare, does that have any impact on foodstuffs and quality? And again, I'm out of my league in depth on that. I just wanted to share with you that this is a major moving commodity on apple juice coming in, and other types of food oils coming in from the Ukraine. So it's really great to keep our eye on what might be happening in the apple juice, and especially always keep an eye on the Food and Drug Administration if there's ever any rejections of any kind of foodstuffs that go on to the so-called red list or yellow list, where we have to kind of keep an eye on that. And that's something that will probably be another segment of our Ocean Freight TV presentation. That is foodstuffs that get that are contaminated and have made it into a inspection or a hold queue by the FDA. Certainly, I'm not saying that this is the case at all with apple juice. This may be the best stuff in the world, but it is just interesting that it's coming right now from a war zone, and that the quantities and qualities, the quantities of the product are intensified, which I think is a good thing, right, for the people of Ukraine, who I wholeheartedly support, and find that this conflict would be great to be over and get things back to normal for shipping patterns. But until we do, I think that's what we'll start to see in the world of ocean freight is a little bit of dynamics in terms of the pipelines of oil, China, the rebuilding of China, the opening of China, the infrastructure plays, and everything else centered around how ocean freight lives, sleeps, and breathes in real time and how it impacts your world. And I'll be there to bring it to you each and every week. So I want to thank you for listening to today's version of Ocean Freight TV. I'm Mr. Insider, Steve Ferreira speaking, CEO of Ocean Audit. You can get in touch with me on all your global ocean freight and global logistics refunds at steve@oceanaudit.com, or simply follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn. Right now, what we're seeing in the ocean freight environment is significant 6 and 7 refunds that are still available from the years 2020, 21, 22, and 23 that the FMC or no other kind of auditing will ever repatriate for you. So you really need the specialization of somebody that's been in the trenches, literally, like I have, to bring you the stories today. And that comes across in my ability to harvest 6 and 7 figure refunds for your CFO, finance, and procurement, and most of all, my logistics brethren that I love and support every day with my content and new shows like this. So we'll catch you next week on another edition of Ocean Freight TV. For now, have a great weekend. I'm Steve Ferreira signing off for today. Take care.